I think what the world has accomplished is so much of even the church is sleepwalking through things.
You have to be spirit-led in where you're at.
Well,
and it has to be backed by the word.
I believe God's called all of us. I believe he's put a gifting on our life, and I believe he provides a lane for us to run in. And find your lane and run in that lane.
Now, more than ever, it takes guts to live for God. On this podcast, we're talking to leaders, coaches, politicians, and industry influencers about what it takes to live the God kind of life. You're listening to the It Takes Guts podcast with Bill Scheer.
Well, welcome back to the show. I'm Bill Scheer, pastor Guts Church in Tulsa, Oklahoma, 30 years. And this podcast is designed just as a real statement, hopefully about ministry, direction of ministry, but also just for men to be husbands, fathers, friends. You know, it's interesting because I look at things through a lens of experience, and you know, there's a difference. You know, as Christians, we talk about love a lot, and man, we're to walk in love, and you have to love your neighbor and the whole deal. And I think that's great. I think we need to walk in love. We need to figure that out with people that are hard to love, but then to expand to trust. You know, it's funny because, you know, people in departing, people will say, "Man, I love you," and I, you know, of course, say, "Hey, you too," or whatever. But the trust part of it, where you look at somebody that's departing and you say, "Hey, I trust you," is a big, almost missing element. And today on this show, I'm joined with one of the best guys I know. I know I give him a hard time, and I probably will in the next 30 minutes as well. It's just hard not to. But my son, Taylor, he's 36. He's an individual, which is attractive, where he kind of marches by the beat of his drummer, you know, but understands honor, understands the value of family and a team. And, you know, I preface this that he was raised in a minister's home, and in a minister's home that didn't have a template, couldn't go to the internet. It was before the internet when we started, couldn't go to the internet to get a task list on how to start a church or how to reach people or it was just kind of trial and error, and hopefully less and less error, but it's still like that. But my opening statement in this podcast is I live by a premise that I believe God is the way you do anything is the way you do everything. And that makes what I do in life very simple. So I don't have to put on my husband cap or my dad cap or my pastor cap. I just am me. And, you know, and honestly, I think there's a lot of times where it probably fell short, especially for people. But I've got to be true to myself. And that's what I essentially believe about my son, Taylor. And I'm going to try to flip him the ball here to introduce himself. But he's living him, and I appreciate that. So welcome, Tay.
Thank you. It's it's interesting just what you said there about you didn't have to put on different hats. It's funny because people would ask me, what's it like living in the home of Pastor Bill? And in all reality, I would just laugh and say who he is on stage is who he is in the vehicle, who he is at home, who he is around friends. And I think especially in my formative years, living in Tulsa, affectionately known as Jerusalem, it's the belt buckle of the Bible Belt, and you saw every phase, everything that came, and through the church we experienced here in Tulsa. And the fact that who you were is who you were, I think was probably, I would say, the number one thing was that taught me was how to be a man, how to be a husband, how to be a father. And it was because you were you. Good, bad, ugly, did not matter. So, no, I think that to me, that's one of the biggest things for me just as a dad was who you were is who you were. So I didn't hear you say something on the stage at church and think that's not real or that's not, who is that? Or, man, that would be nice or whatever that was. It was, no, who you are is who you are. And that's huge.
Well, no, there's more times than not, it's like, hey, you can't say that up there. You can say that in the truck or with us. And I'm learning that, you know, I mean, it's really hard for me because there's not fine lines out there the way I operate. It's not a fine line between being real and woke or whatever the term is. It sounds goofy, me 64 using that term, but I can't, it's hard to go there. It really is. Yeah. And I know it is. We talk a lot.
It changes frequently, and that's the hard part. Woke was good, but now it's not, if that makes sense. So it's in the last 6 months or a year. Yeah. And I think in all reality, it became a competition to where it went, who was the most woke. And again, I'm like you said, I'm 36. I have a wife, 4 children. My oldest is 6. We run cattle. I have an outdoor company. I'm on the pastoral staff at the church. I really don't have time. I'm at the place where I can't care about everything, if that makes sense. And that in society, the woke was I cared about whatever was the hot topic today. And in all reality, I have enough with me in mind that I can't be concerned about everybody else. And it's, you know, there was a comedian that said, it was probably mid-2020s, maybe early 21, but it's, what are we fake caring about today? And that's what the woke thing came. So again, I think it's shown, and the evidence has shown over the last few years with the church and with the growth and the strength of the church is here's what the word says, here's what we're based on, and here's how we're going to act no matter what is going on.
Right. And, you know, you've been, and as well as Brooklyn and Kennedy, and then the dozens and maybe hundreds of people your age in our church that help me think, because I want to think through things. I want to, okay, what's the end game look like? Or what's the win here? That's kind of how I look at it. But it's hard for me to have even the initial step, the thought to, okay, I can't think through it because I don't know where to start thinking about this. And you help me with that a lot. And I look at it that, you know, it's interesting and being around pastors and with pastors and everything going on in our society and with lifestyles and they've always been around. You know, I mean, it's not like new to now, this generation, you know, but like there's people that in terms of lifestyle, our church is very broad. Our church is very diverse in all of that. Okay. And what's interesting is we don't negotiate the word. We don't compromise the word a bit. I'm not going to. To me, it's black and white. To me, the Old Testament's a type and shadow of what's to come. The 4 Gospels are a bridge to get us to the new and better covenant that I take literal, the new and better covenant. So when it fits in there, I'll talk to other pastors and they'll say, especially older guys and my generation, and they'll say, man, what do you do with this type of people in your church? I'm like, what do you mean, what do we do?
Right.
You know, like there's a pariah out there, or they're the present day lepers. And really, honestly, I think a lot of people that have counter lifestyles that, you know, what we would think in the nuclear family, that they probably feel like that from the church. They probably feel like pariahs. They probably feel like they're lepers. How did Jesus treat lepers? See, that's the part of it to me where, you know, I think a lot of times, even with the pandemic and other things going on, like it's like, yeah, I get it. We can rationally deal with it, realistically deal with it, or it's cooties. Right. You know, it's like cooties are in the air, and what are we going to do? And I think we've just got to get our feet back firmly planted on the ground. And I know a big statement in your life is having done all the stand, you stand therefore. And that's what we need to find. We just need to find our stand.
Yeah. And I think you're right. It's everything going on socially. The fact that deconstructionism, I don't even know if that's what they call it, but deconstruction of religion is one of the hot topics right now. Really, it's very difficult for me to wrap my mind around the whole thing of deconstruction because it's such a victim mentality. And I think that's where it's hard is there's hurt, there's everything that we dealt with, plus society, plus trends, plus what are we fake caring about today? And you're right, it is a moving target. And there's things where it's like, it's for me, especially sitting where I sit and then messages happening. If there's ever a think about rewording this or saying it different, it's because we know your heart. But again, it's the changing tides. And then there's also that you're 64 and set in your ways. So, but I think you've done a great job of just altering some of that where it's your heart hasn't changed on certain topics. It just is worded different, if that makes sense. And that's, to me, you're taking a step towards the culture, but it's not compromising anything.
Well, if I can do the math with it, it works. If I can connect the dots, okay, that works. If I can't, it's like I probably should just steer away. Or, and that's why it's so helpful for me. And in our relationship, Taylor, and I can't speak for you, but for me, I always wanted you around. So it was real easy. People say, man, how'd you raise Taylor? It's like, get in the truck. I mean, and it's funny. It seems almost so elementary and so basic and so simple, but it was the truth. It's like, now we talk every day, and but even as a boy, it's like, hey, get in the truck, and you'd be riding along, and at that time, just even trying to make things work in my mind on what God had called us to do. And when you got old enough to ride in the truck, it's not what God's called me to do anymore. It's what God's called us to do. And see, that's something that I think that I'm glad it worked out the way it did, because it wasn't I got to figure out what to do with my kid, or somebody's got to look after my kid. Because it's like, hey, get in the truck. And then if I'm in a meeting too long and you're asleep on a chair somewhere, it's like, I'm not one of those guys that it's like, oh, bless his little heart. It's like, yeah, I'll wake him up when we go home. And I just think that the way things are right now, especially, and my concern about ministry, and this is something you can probably fill in some gaps, is the statistics can be skewed. The numbers to fit the narrative. I think our politics uses that so well. I listen to people, and it's like, okay, pick a side, pick a stand. There's people in ministry that, man, God gave me a tumor. I'm believing God to take this tumor or to heal this tumor. And I'm like, okay, you got to pick a side. Either he gave it to you or he takes it from you. Either he gave it to you or he heals you. Those are two contradictory angles. And I know there's smarter people than me that are watching or listening to this that might take offense to that. And at this point, with that side of religion, if it's offensive, it's offensive. I'm just going to lay it out. I don't think Jesus worried about offending folk. He called them vipers.
Yeah.
He called them their generation perverse. And I definitely am not the pot calling the kettle black. I'm just saying, here's where I stand on it. I believe God's a healer. I believe God's a provider. I believe, and if there's anything that stops short of that, that's on me, not on him.
Right. And I think that's where I talk about it, and it's because it's prevalent now and so prevalent, but the deconstruction, I think society in general, there's no personal responsibility anymore.
That's an interesting term.
It's somebody.
Very new term.
What term?
Deconstruction.
Right. But it's that there's no personal responsibility anymore. It's not, here's the promise and I fell short, or anything short of that promise that God's given us. I fell short. It's obviously God, then there's hurt, and then you there's a victim mentality to it. And it's difficult because that is that's most of society now, or most of the issues. It's that no one takes personal responsibility. It's not my fault that I can't stop doing this. It's a disease, or it's a issue, or it's a mental thing. And it's like,
I was born this way. Or
I'm not saying, again, that's where it's hard for me, because it's like I got my own things to deal with, and I got enough going on that I'm not going to sit here and argue with it. But again, it's personal responsibility has to come into play. And I think as a man, personal responsibility has to come into play. And that's where, you say that you always wanted me around in the truck. You don't know how I felt. I would say then I didn't want to. But now I look back and appreciate it, and I have implemented that into my parenting, because when I go feed, it's in a truck for an hour. I want Tripp, who's about to be 5, we're going to have those conversations, because it's interesting. That's where the real conversation happens, because there's no distraction. Our kids don't have phones. They don't watch phone. We don't allow technology to parent our kids, is a stand we've taken. So that's where those conversations happen. It's, I get asked a lot of, what does this mean? Or what is that? Because they're at the age that they're at. But I see that conversation then progressing, and it's here is why, here is the right answer, and here's why we think that, or why we do that.
Man, a great example, and this might have to be edited out, but you sent me a picture of Charleston, our oldest granddaughter, that she's in the backseat of the truck saying, "Dad, what does this mean? Dad, was it?" And I can envision this, because I can think of you doing this, being in the backseat saying, "What is this? What is this?" And I gotta tune you in, and then you look in the mirror, you turn around and look, and she's sitting there like this, and you're like, "What is that?" She's saying, "What does that mean?"
Yeah,
it's like, okay, and what's awesome about it, it's innocent because her hand is backwards.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, she's 6 and asking what sticking her middle finger up means. And I don't know if that conversation happens, or it does. I don't know when it happens, or what. My thought is with the being in the truck, and that's such a vital point to my upbringing that I have, again, implemented it into my life. But that's where that conversation happens, and I want to get that foundation in before she can find out from the world what, here's what it means, and here's...
What was your response to...
I used what you told me, which I believed until I was in middle school, and then got made fun of often, but it was that you wanted them to go to hell. And we don't want anybody to go to hell. It doesn't matter who they are, but that's what it means. And I asked her, do you want them to go to hell? And it was no. But that's what I told her. And for me, again, I want to get that foundation of that's not an option with whatever it is. I mean, it's every day, multiple times a day, I tell both of my girls how beautiful they are, how smart, how attractive. I want them to be so used to it, and they literally just shrug me off at this point. But I want them to be so used to hearing that when they're 15 and some boy comes up and says whatever the pickup line is for that time, she just laughs at them and says, "My dad's told me that every day."
Yeah.
And again, it's that I want you to know who you are. I don't want social media, the internet, society to tell you what you have to be a woman. Because, and it's relevant now, but they can't even define what a woman is right now.
Well, and I think a lot of it, what the point you're making is you want to place a value on your daughter or on your kid, and them not look for something out in our society or out in the world to value them. That's what a lot of this stuff is. A lot of the whole woke, some of it might be valid, some of it's nonsense. The whole idea, even the concept of deconstruction, that
it's dumb.
Well, so I look at it and I think they're just trying to find some value here. What about me over here? Hey, pick me. It's that kid at the end of the bench in junior high basketball. The coach is frustrated with the players out on the court. So he looks down to the end of the bench. That kid's down there just looking at him thinking, "Hey, I'm available. My grandmama's in the stand. Can you?" And it just has seeped into everything now. And I think it's perfect because I think people, if we can find the button to push to get through this time for people in a healthy way, I think that's the secret sauce, especially the gospel, especially of the idea that Jesus is the answer. Well, he is. So now we don't get to sit across the podcast table with him. We find him in his word. We find him in the Bible, who God really is. See, because I think even most church people know what the Bible talks about, but I'm not sure specifically, because I'll tell you, it's so detailed. It's so amazing. When you look at mental health, when you look at physical health, when you look at the whole idea of success in business and even wealth, that there's depictions of it and there's specifics of it that are in the word, that it's like, oh my gosh, there's a whole different way to live that's so much higher than anything the world can offer us.
Yeah. And again, I think now I look at it in history, there's always stuff going on and always stuff people are dealing with. It feels like with the internet and social media and all of that, we know about it way quicker, and it feels a lot more prevalent than it did when you would have to go to the movie theater, to watch the news. But what I do appreciate, so there's advantages and disadvantages to all of it. But I think one of the advantages for the church in this time is if you are a Bible-believing, word-based church that can back up what they say. I think what's hard is when you say people know not necessarily what the Bible says, but get the gist of what it is. So much of that is opinionated rhetoric, commentary, thoughts on the Bible, and it's not real. That's not what that says. It's what someone has taken from it. But I think now in society, it's question everything, if that makes sense. There is feels like a general distrust for most things, most institutions that we would say were immovable, if that makes sense. The thought of, yeah, our trust for them is unwavering. But now we question things. And to me, that is an advantage for the church when it comes to this time, because especially for us, and this is what I know, all I know, is we can back everything up in the word. So here's what the Bible says. So it's not just the preachers that are telling you this. Now we're questioning almost all authority, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that we can back it up with a unwavering truth of the Bible, that we can back it up, is a huge advantage for us.
Well, absolutely. And, to me, when I look at it, that Jesus died on the cross, and the Bible says the veil was rent. Well, the world is waiting for the veil to be lifted. It's not going to be lifted. It's split now to where we can get on the other side of that veil. So now I look at society, I look at politics, I look at economics, I look at everything. There's always been a veil to the common man. There's people that maybe the wizard behind the curtain that's pulling the levers, that there's always been those guys. But then the common man's been on the other side of the veil. It's like, okay, there's nothing we can do about it. But there's a split in that veil now in relation to God, but I also think in relation to what's going on in the world. And there's a way and Jesus is the way, his word is the way for us to get through that veil and see clearly what's going on. I mean, we can do that. See, that's where, to me, what's happening in society and politics and economics all factor into the gospel. When it's like, wait, we're not living that way. Jesus, his narrative was, you've heard it said, but I say to you. Yeah, render unto Caesar what's Caesar's, but render unto God what's God's. Seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. All these things will be added unto you. It's like, if that's how we start in our lives, because Sandy and I have talked about it a lot, but it dawned on her, that everything in life that we value, that we truly value, The must-haves in life have come to us. We haven't had to scratch and claw and try to climb any kind of ladder to get there. And what's interesting is that because of the marriage that I have, because of the family that I have, I've never had this longing to be somebody else or somewhere else. It's everywhere I am. Like even right now, looking at my son in a podcast, we can change the world from here. But I've had that notion, in that building at 41st and Memorial. I mean, I drive by it now, it's for lease, and it's like, oh, dear God, how'd we start a church there? You know, and hundreds of people came. And I'd get up to preach, and I'd think, why are you here? Where did you come from? This is crazy. But I think there's a longing for people for something. There's got to be more. There's got to be more. I want whatever that is. It's going to come to you, but you have to seek God first. His righteousness. We can't find righteousness without God. And we have to understand that when we listen or look at the world or listen to the world, people in the world, we're in it but not of it. So now it's like my righteousness has nothing to do with me. It's all Jesus. But then everything else now, I've got to be compliant with that righteousness and confront issues in my life to be able to have the success in life that God's promised us.
Yeah, and we're coming out of a time, again, where you're stay at home, you quarantine, all the extra stuff that we could fill our minds, our time with not to actually address issues or deal with things got stripped away. It's a very interesting time just in society because, again, and we live in middle America where we didn't see a lot of the restrictions and the rules and the laws and things like that to the point where we still felt where for us, the start of the pandemic was actually great for our family because it was one of those, we got down the road, we had kids at that point, and it was, let's shut down, it pulled down all of the stuff that we would fill time with. And we went back to where we still do it, where we have 5 or 6 dinners a week at our dinner table. And society has gone away from that.
What's the national average for that?
It can't be high. And
I could make up a statistic to back the narrative.
That's where we need somebody that can look that up. But looking at it, that's the conversations of asking my kids, no matter, and again, I'm speaking from my experience, but I have a 6, an almost 5, a 2, and a 1. We still ask, what was your favorite?
The 2 is Delta.
And the 2 is Delta.
You're a Jersey girl. Yeah,
she's special. But we still ask, what was your favorite part about today? What'd you learn at school today? And it just the conversation where you look at it, at what it feels like most people do is, again, they're on phones. I have had a rule ever since we got married, and it just worked now, but there's no phones at the dinner table.
Right.
And it's because we want that conversation. It's too easy. Listen, whatever fire is going on right now, when you're sitting at dinner, it's still going to be there when you're done. That 30 minutes or whatever is not going to determine the outcome of that fire.
That phone is going to find its way into your hand.
Right.
I mean, that's the amazing thing. It's like, where's my phone? Or where did I put my phone? And so just that, where it's like, okay, no phone.
Yeah.
Is refreshing. That there's no phone here is refreshing. And I know that sounds like the crotchety old man, but there's something to that. There really is. I mean,
no, it's breaking the tether that you have to, in all reality, stuff that doesn't matter. And I think that's what's hard. It's like, what was so important that you had to look at your phone yesterday? There's not much. And I think, again, hitting the reset button over the last few years, 2 years or whatever it is, hitting the reset button has been refreshing because, again, it's what actually matters. What actually deserves my time. I mean, and right now, me personally, I'm in a season of life where free time is extremely minimal. So it's, what do I do? Is that worth my time?
Mm-hmm.
And I get home and Tripp wants to throw a baseball or a
Play
football.
catch,
He
shoot
wants to do
baskets,
something. And it's like,
kick the football.
well,
He's four. Just think about what's happening.
Right. And I'm looking at it where I get home and I've worked all day. And the last thing I want to do is stand up outside in 100-degree weather. But in all reality, that's what matters to me in my life at this moment, playing catch with him, teaching him baseball and football and the terminology. And again, I want to coach every one of his teams. I want that time with him because that's where I can also, it's another avenue for me to mold him into the man he's supposed to be. We had an incident in basketball last year where he wanted water, and I told him, no, you can have, it was in the middle of the game. I said, you can get it when play stops. And he essentially pouted. He was 4, but essentially pouted. And that was a conversation that I could have that if I wasn't his coach, I wouldn't be able to have that. What am I going to have it after the game? And no, listen, we don't act like that. We are Scheers. We are men. You don't act like that. You don't need water. You're not going to always get what you want. And I think that's what's hard is, and you've said it since I was a kid, but you want your kids to be able to hear no. And I think that is a lost art at this point in life because it's entitlement. I deserve this. And that's not reality.
Well, every kid out there thinks they're the boss, throwing fit. It's funny. I don't know if my memory's skewed or whatever it is, but I even asked Sandy. I said, Sandy, did our kids ever throw a fit in public? She said, no. I was like, okay, good, because people throw. I mean, it's like you've got to get a hold of that kid right now.
There are consequences,
right?
And that's where I get it where society's at and all that, but it's like, no, we spank because there needs to be a consequence. I need them to know that we are, as a dad, I am, again, trying to parent and develop you to be a contributing member to society. So you're not going to always get what you want. Stuff's not always going to go your way. And that's where, again, it's you touch that hot stove. I would rather give you a spanking and teach you that before you actually put your hand on it. And that's where, again, there is a consequence to your action. And what's interesting is people talk, I hear the argument on both sides of just spanking in general. And I have spanked Tripp. We literally walked downstairs, sat at the dinner table, and he wants to sit next to me, put his hand on my leg, and kept it there the whole time. And that's where, again, it's hard. Well, I want my kids to make their own choices. And no, He's 4. I don't want him making any choice.
No, there's people that couldn't hear anything after you told Tripp no about water.
Right.
I mean, you understand, we're not denying our kid water. It's not like the 60s.
He made it. He's still breathing.
The 60s, when I was playing Little League sports, and they were putting salt tablets in water, and you had to earn the water. It's not like that now, okay? There's plenty of breaks in the game where you can get water. But when it's time to be active in the game, that's not the time to drink water. And the interesting thing is, if you can send that or even begin that message at 4 years old, when he's 14 and 24 and 34, that's going to be in him.
Yeah.
And we don't think, even working now. I went on a Harley ride with some guys last night, and we stopped at a Mexican restaurant in Bixby that's amazing, 127th and Memorial, plug, but Real Taco. But we stopped there, and the owner came and he said, we were just talking, and he's expanding, and his business is blowing up, and they've been in the church for 10 years and have been through the internship. But he said the hard thing is his employees. So he's got his sons are working every day. And I'm thinking that's the best place for those boys to be.
Yeah.
Is alongside their dad, is working with their dad. But he said at McDonald's, they're paying people every day now. At the end of their shift, they give them a check for that shift every day. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is amazing. The one scripture that came to mind, I was riding home from there and I was thinking, man, work while the sun's shining, because the day is coming when the sun's not shining and no man will work. And I know that contextually that's a little bit outside the range, but just any kind of work ethic that we can instill, that's instilled at 4 to 14, not at 24.
Right.
And it's hard where, you teach your kids responsibility. You teach your kids the value of the value of things. Because people are like, can I get this? And I know your mom and I are bad examples because we buy them. I mean, we took them to Brahms the other night and it was $45 or something. And then Charleston left with a king-size box of tricks. And you guys came over to the house Sunday night and she said, man, I forgot to bring the cereal. And Sandy said, well, you can eat it at home. Said, no, my mama didn't let me eat this. So I know we're not great examples of that as grandparents, but it is what it is. But the point is it's church. The way people look at my pastoring style, it's the way I parented. It's the only thing I know. It's like, at the end of the day, is it working? And it's like, yeah, life is still full of lessons and we're still learning and it's still trials and it's tests. The Bible says the testing of your faith works patience, that we're still tested. Like, even if you're ready for a test, man, you're nervous about that test. Your hands are sweaty because you're taking a test. And, the athletic are contest tests. Military, there's contests, and I look at it and think, I think about baseball. Baseball is trying to regain younger generations, and I think we're missing the whole point. I think about in the 60s, my dad had to take me to games. So I'm riding to a game. I'm sitting in the stands at a Cardinal game with my dad and fell in love with the Cardinals because I'm with my dad. And he didn't push it on me. He didn't, and looking at it, what are you going to do now to sit somewhere with your kid for 3 hours?
Yeah.
And then have inning breaks and have that opportunity to talk. I heard Bob Costas one time saying, without baseball, I don't have a relationship with my dad. And I remember hearing that before I had kids. And I thought, you know what? Here, get in the truck. And we drive by buildings and it could be an old tire store or it could be
it just had to be a structure.
And I'd say, man, we could put a great church in that building. And it's like, because to a hammer, everything looks like a nail. But, you look at it now, it's I don't know if that carried on, maybe that died or that skips generations or whatever. But it's almost like you got to be able to visualize, man, we can change the world from here.
Well, but it's also, and it hasn't died but it's, to me, again, I look at, as a man, what are some of my traits, characteristics? And again, I'm in a season with young kids that I think through, and there are things that we absolutely have translated that I'm doing it exactly like it was done. There are things that we don't do. There's things that are changed. But it's that dreamer aspect that I love that I have. But then also there is a confidence that no matter what, I can make that happen. Whether it be, and I'm not just saying me, but it's when I am where I'm supposed to be, operating how I'm supposed to be operating, fulfilling the call that's placed on my life, yeah, I can do anything. So that's where that translates for me, is you saying, man, we could put a great church there. It's has nothing to do with the building, it's the confidence that you have in who you are, just as a man. And that's where, again, because stuff's got to get done. I mean, I look at it now, it doesn't matter if you're sick, there are still things to do. It doesn't matter if you have all this stuff to do. I mean, and cattle's my example to that, but they don't care if you have a fever, you still have to feed them. They still need to eat. Otherwise, it affects your bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So I can't call in sick because if I call in sick, they don't eat. Which then, months down the road affects my bottom line. So I look at it and it's like, no, you still have to, I'm going to do what I have to do. And there's a confidence there that when I get out there, when I do it, it's going to be good and it's going to thrive and it's going to succeed because I'm doing it. And that to me is the instill of everything you put your hand to prospers.
Everything. That's the amazing thing. Whatever you do it heartily as unto the Lord. Everything you put your hand to prosper. See, that's how important the grace of God is on our lives. That us being in the right place with the right people, then whatever you do. And that's always you're living proof of that concept and that the protocols of that concept, that whatever you do, it'll prosper. And prosper is, there's a financial aspect of prospering, but the overall aspect is you're in control of it. And that's what how I've tried to raise you was, look, you're in control of your life. Take responsibility. Man, subject yourself to accountability with people you trust. And that's the big key. And what's great about you as a man now is I trust you. And now everything in my life is predicated upon trust. People say, man, here, business people, bankers, whomever will say, hey, trust me. It's like, I don't know you.
Because in all reality, they're looking out for number one.
You can trust me. Well, prove it.
Right.
Man,
well, it's a lost art. And it's hard to trust anything at this point. I mean, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. We question every news story. We question, man, this happened and it's I can't believe it. And it's like, what's the end game? I don't trust that I'm getting all the information, or I don't trust that I understand what's going on. And that, to me, again, it's an advantage for the church because we have the immovable Word of God.
Well, absolutely. I mean, who in politics can we trust? Well, there's a few people I can trust, but there's got to be full disclosure. There's got to be transparency. That politicians work for us. That's the concept of a constitutional republic. And I mean, things get skewed because of the politics, because of the stands that people take. And it's like, well, I don't like his demeanor and to me, it's like, okay, I want people to be consistent. If they're consistent, okay, I find out what I can trust. And there's a lot of people I trust, but it's taken years.
Yeah.
And they've stayed consistent. And I appreciate your consistency, Taylor. I appreciate the stand you take in your life. And
I've taken some stands. Weird ones. But again, for me, this is where I have a peace. And I think that in the world today, that's the only thing we can go on. I mean, you've said it, there's been decisions that we have made as a family where we aren't going to be a part of this. We're not going to do this, or we're not going to go here. And I look at it and it's like, I'm going to err on the side of protection for my family. I'm going to err on the side of I love people. I want to help people. But in all reality, when it comes down to it, I'm responsible for me and my 6. I'm responsible for the 5 other people that live under my roof. So we don't allow certain things in the house. We don't have certain conversations in the house because I am the gatekeeper of that home and I'm protecting what is in there. And while some people would look and say, that's extreme, yeah, but I would much rather err on the side of protection than not. I mean, there's situations that Cass and I will literally walk outside and talk on the front or back porch, but I won't allow those in my home. We set out when we first got married that we were going to have a house of peace, a safe place, and there's going to be there's no strife, there's no tension. And that has been something that we have been able to accomplish, but it's taking the hard stands of that's not allowed in our home. That's not talked about in our home. And we're in ministry, so we deal with a lot of situations.
Yeah, there's expectations on you.
That's when you got to be able to talk things through. We talk about it outside. And again, it might be trivial, but for me, it's that I want for her to be confident that it is so important for me to protect our home and to protect our children in the atmosphere of our home that I won't allow that in our home. That's
admirable.
And some of it is, some of it's fun to be different and all of that. But no, I've decided there are very few hills that I'm going to die on at this point in life, this juncture in life. I have those hills and I'm willing to die on them. But again, it's protecting, because I don't want the world teaching my son how to be a man or my daughters how to be a woman. Like, absolutely not.
Right.
So I'm going to do that in our home. We don't allow certain, things on the TV. We are very strict about what they watch. And it's not in a weird, legalistic Christian sort of way. Like, it was interesting. Charleston, our oldest, when she was young, Trolls came out, and it was fun music, well-known music everybody knows. And she knew almost every word of the movie. But I look back, and I was talking to my wife, and she's like, oh, we weren't allowed to watch Trolls. It was demonic. So it's not a legalistic side of it. Mm-hmm. But we're going to protect, control what you can control. And that's what we have done with our kids. Are kids perfect? Absolutely not. But we're striving to get there.
Well, you raise your kids to give them a fighting chance.
Yeah.
That's how I think it is. And that's all you're doing. And it's interesting because 30 minutes ago we talked about teaching our kids how to hear no. Well, there's a lot of outside influence that doesn't get that. It's not that big a deal. It's like, well, yeah, you're right, but it's a deal. You're right, but it could open up into a lot of other bad crap. And that's where you've got to take a stand on your home. And I know that hopefully there's people watching this or listening to this that are like, okay, where's my stand? Because you got to figure out where your stand is. And I think what the world has accomplished is so much of even the church is sleepwalking through things. And it's like, and it's white noise out there, and everything's content. And man, I heard a guy say, I look at it and I think, oh my gosh, the content it's like a hurricane of content. And then guys say, man, there's so much room for more content. And I'm like, this is nuts. It's not about content. It's about funneling the things down to the absolutes, and then everything else just details.
Because it's not just the amount of content. You can find content to back whatever argument you want. You have to be spirit-led in where you're at. Well, and it has to be backed by the word. And that's the only way it makes sense.
And having conversations with local government, with school board people, and those where it's like, yeah, how about reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and not sexual? I mean, it's like, wait a second, that history teacher's going to teach sex. I was like, no, teach history.
Yeah,
stay in your lane. And I mean, that's the key. I mean, I have to hear that where, okay, find my lane, because I believe God's called all of us. I believe he's put a gifting on our life, and I believe he provides a lane for us to run in. And find your lane and run in that lane, and support people that are in their lane, and don't support people that aren't in their lane. And I think it's that simple.
Sure. And it's finding that lane and running. And I think what's hard is, I think there is a general lane in life you're supposed to run, but seasonal, there's stuff that comes up that you have to run in, you got to do. And it's, to me, it's being open to, where do you have a peace? What is God telling you? And what's interesting is, you're graced for every season that you're in. We talk about Delta, and she's 2.5. We adopted her and got her day one. She is on go
right now,
24/7.
Everybody loves Delta
because everybody gets Delta in 15-minute stints.
Everybody loves Delta. Love Delta with us.
But I look at it and it's, again, we've gone through, we want to break her spirit, not her will, because I understand and I look at it. We've had conversations.
No, you want to break her will,
not her spirit. And we look at it at this point, I'll break anything. No, but we look at it and I look to the future of Delta and what she can accomplish, what she can do in life with that, if it can be channeled. And I think that's where, again, where I want her. So we're graced for that, where yes, it's exhausting, but I mean, we wouldn't have it any other way.
Well, just Sunday night, I told Delta no. She went to the edge and stopped. So she can hear no. She gets no. And all it is now is just, to me, is just that foundation of no now. That and it sounds like that this is all about no, and it kind of is. It's let your yes be yes and your no be no. Do all things without murmuring and complaining, for this is the will of God for you in Christ Jesus. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. I mean, that's to me where it's like no excuses, no explanations. But she's learning no. And what's great is she's only 2 with a strong will and with a switch on go all the time. And I see so many kids that you can't find their switch to flip it on.
Right.
And they don't have to hear no. And that's the danger. The danger is, no, it's not that big a deal, or my kid's just how he is. It's like, no. But man, a part of parenting is shaping your kids and helping your kids and to be the best they possibly can be.
No, totally. And that's where, I mean, we joke around some of the stuff. She was born in North Philly. And we were like, yeah, that's the North Philly in her. But again, that switch is always on and we're graced for that. But it's the season that we're in life right now is, for us as parents, it is all about no. Because again, it's with my sons. We have the conversation, not yet with Doc, but with Tripp, we'll have a conversation of your word. If you say yes, it's yes. If you say no, it's no. And I think what's hard is we have gotten to this place of entitlement in society to where it's become extremely soft. And
so everything's yes.
Yeah. And then there's conversations of, I mean, I might have gone too far on some of them, but it's don't cry. You're a boy. Because if you're going to cry, and we have lived with the adage, and this is one thing that I changed from my upbringing, but I don't think it was meant to be this way, but it was emotions weren't really valued, if that makes sense. I also had 2 sisters, and one of them was extremely emotional, so I understand completely, but we want to instill in our kids, you're allowed to have emotions, but you always have to be in control of them.
Well, there's no pushback from yes. Hey, Dad, can I do this? Sure. There's no pushback. No? It's like,
yeah, and they want to explain why, and it's
right.
No means no. But that's where, again, we want them to have emotions, but they have to be under control. So I'm okay if you're not good with me saying no. If that makes you upset, mad, I get it. But that doesn't translate to a fit. That doesn't translate to losing your mind, screaming. I mean, none of that.
Right.
It's last night, for instance, Tripp asked something. They have school today, so it was going to be too late. I said no, and he just lowered his head and walked off because he knows not to respond. And my response to him was, pick your head up. And again, I want you to be able to hear no, to receive correction. Because again, and it's so interesting what you learn just in life, but there are things I see in him that cast multiple times and said, man, you went from 0 to 100 way too quick with him, which I understand, but it's stuff that I see in him that I've had to deal with at a later age. You see yourself in your kid where I had to deal with that at a later age. Let's cut it off now.
I'm still dealing with that now.
I'm sure all good things, but that's where, again, I want to raise him because life is not fair. So the whole, well, that's not fair. Yeah, life's not. But again, you are in control. And that's where if you can be in control of your emotions, if you can be in control of your decision making, then the world is your oyster. But it's not fair. There are winners and losers. I mean, I still take, and it's interesting because they're playing little kid sports where they don't keep score. Every kid on that court knows exactly what the score is. And again, it's do you feel that after you lose? It's like, that's not fun. Don't do that again. But again, that's where we get best effort. That's where we're going to do everything we can to not lose because that's not fun. But I need for you to experience losing so you know what that feels like. I need you to hear no so you know what that is. So then it's, well, I want this. It prepared, the hearing no prepared me for my life right now, because when I got married, then it was two become one. But then as soon as we had our first kid, your life's not about you anymore. Where it's, I'm not accumulating wealth for myself. I want generational wealth. I want my kids' kids to be able to benefit from what I'm doing now. So it's not, I'm doing this so I can buy a better truck or whatever that is.
Well, and you're not talking wabout generational wealth like your kids won't have to work.
No, they're working now. And it's, if they know on Saturdays, when I go feed, when I go do anything, one of them has to come and they're working. And Charleston's not a place where she has to stop by a gas station or something on the way home to pay her for her work. But it's no, I want my kids to know we bought Charleston a dog for her 6th birthday, but I let her know I'm not going to feed this dog. I'm not going to water this dog. This is your responsibility. And there have been conversations of we sit down to dinner and she's going to sit down and I said, has 6 eaten yet? You don't eat until 6 eats. Because there's responsibility and to all the animal cruelty people, the dog's eating every day. But I want her to know that there's responsibility involved in life. So you still have to work. But that's where, again, I want that generational blessing to be passed down. And we have been overly blessed in life. But I look at it now and it's because I didn't have to learn some of the stuff that I see my peers having to learn. I didn't have to, you take it in the teeth and move on. But that's being a man. And I think that's where it's hard for people to understand, where it's, man, you get knocked down. It's interesting because every business that I have had, that I currently have, I feel like I've done everything wrong. It's people are like, man, I'd love to ride around with you and just hear how to do this. And I'm like, I can tell you how not to do it. But then I look at it and it's, every business is thriving. Everything is rolling. And we've been blessed uncontrollably where it's, no, but I think first off, it's, I am who I am and I've made those decisions and I put my hand to it and everything we put our hand to prospers, like we said. But then also there's generational blessings because you and mom have done what you are supposed to do. You're where you're supposed to be doing what you're supposed to be doing. We get the benefit of those blessings. And again, that's where as soon as we had Charleston, because again, we don't find out what we're having. We're old school in that way. And I would have bet my net worth we're having a boy. And I remember when Charleston came out, I was supposed to announce the gender and I couldn't find words because having a girl wasn't even a thought. I mean, there was no thought whatsoever. And I'm in no way, shape, or form disappointed that she's a girl. She controls my life at this point. But I thought about all of the things then. It brought the parenting side of I'm responsible for this human being and the outcome of their life is how I view it. Is that reality? I don't know. I would like to think so. But again, that's me being who I'm supposed to be, where now I'm setting it up to where their life, they have every opportunity possible. And that's all we want for our kids is, I agree. I don't want to raise a trust fund baby, a silver spoon baby. But what I do want is every opportunity that they would want, they have that opportunity. But again, I benefited from you guys doing what you're supposed to do And that's where we have then translated to, we're going to do what we're supposed to do, whether we like it or not, because that's what we're supposed to be doing. No matter what season it is and how difficult or whatever, it doesn't matter at this point, because I want to create that opportunity for my kids to where they see it, and then my grandkids can then benefit from that also.
Well, yeah, we could go all day.
Yeah.
And this is like breakfast for us. This is a meal or a car ride or whatever it is. Taylor, thank you for being on here. Thanks for keeping your heart open to the things of God. That's all I care. You've married the right person. You're fulfilling God's purpose. That's a huge win. So thank you very much. They didn't tell me how to close this, so I'm just going to tell everybody thanks for watching or listening. And
see you next time. Hopefully there's a next time, and we'll see you then.
Yeah. Yeah. It takes guts. I believe that with all my heart. God asked me in 1979 when I was moping. I was thinking, I don't fit in. This whole thing sucks. These people are weird, talking about Christians. And God said, are you going to have the guts to serve me? Kind of called me out. And that's how God speaks to me. So that's usually how it's translated to the ministry and the words I give people. It's probably how I parented as well, now thinking about it. And let's have the guts to serve it.